Hello everyone. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is right now. That's how YouTube keeps sending you more chilling stories like this. And now, let the night begin with Story 1. The Town That Stopped Talking. I was standing at the edge of the old mill when I saw it, something pale moving behind the broken windows on the third floor, watching me with eyes that didn't blink. I ran back to town, my heart hammering, but when I tried to tell anyone about what I'd seen, the woman at the grocery store turned away mid-sentence, just turned her back to me like I'd ceased to exist. That's when I knew. They'd all been waiting for this moment. I moved to Millbrook 3 months after my divorce was finalized. I needed space from everything, from Derek, from our friends who had to pick sides, from the city where every corner reminded me of the life I'd planned and lost. I found Millbrook through one of those best small towns in New England listicles, and something about it called to me. Population 2,847. One main street, a library, a diner, a general store. It looked like the kind of place where people still knew their neighbors, where I could rebuild myself slowly and quietly. The apartment I rented was above the bookstore on Main Street. Mrs. Calloway, the owner, was a warm woman in her 60s who insisted I call her Patricia. She helped me carry boxes up the narrow stairs and brought me homemade banana bread on my first night. The next morning, I walked to the diner for breakfast, and the waitress, Jenny, her name tag read, chatted with me about the best hiking trails in the area. Everyone I met was friendly in that genuine small-town way I'd hoped for. People waved from their porches. The pharmacist remembered my name after I'd been there once. For the first few weeks, I felt like I was healing. I got into a routine. Coffee at the diner, walks around town, afternoons reading in the park. I started exploring the trails Jenny had mentioned. There were dozens of them winding through the forests around Millbrook, most of them old logging roads that had been reclaimed by nature. I liked the solitude of it, the way the trees seemed to absorb all the noise in my head. It was on one of these hikes, about a month in, that I found the trail leading to the old mill. I hadn't known it was there. None of the trail maps mentioned it, and Jenny certainly hadn't brought it up. But the path was clear enough, and I was feeling adventurous. The mill itself was massive, a 4-story stone building that looked like it had been abandoned for at least 50 years. Most of the windows were broken, and ivy had consumed entire walls. There was something beautiful about it in a melancholy way. This industrial monument slowly being reclaimed by the forest. I walked around the perimeter, taking photos on my phone. I was thinking it would make a great subject for the photography class I'd been considering taking. That's when I noticed the third-floor window, one of the few that still had glass, and behind it, something moved. At first, I thought it was just the way the light was hitting the glass, creating the illusion of movement. But then I saw it clearly. A pale figure, humanoid but wrong somehow, pressed against the window, watching me. Its eyes were too large, too dark, and they didn't blink, not once. I stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. Then my survival instinct kicked in and I ran. I didn't stop running until I was back on Main Street, my lungs burning. I went straight to the general store thinking I'd ask about the mill, maybe laugh about how I'd scared myself. Tom, who ran the store, was at the counter. I'd talked to him a dozen times by then. "Tom, hey," I said, still catching my breath. "I was just out at that old mill past the Eastern Trail and He turned away from me. Literally turned his back to me mid-sentence and started organizing cigarette cartons behind the counter. "Tom?" I said, confused. "I was just saying..." He didn't turn around. Didn't acknowledge me at all. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, I left. I told myself he was having a bad day or hadn't heard me or was dealing with something personal. But then I went to the diner for lunch and Jenny did the same thing. She was walking toward my booth with the coffee pot, saw me, and her smile just evaporated. She turned around and went to serve a table on the other side of the restaurant. When I tried to get her attention, she looked right through me. The cold fear that had started in my chest began to spread. I paid my bill, left it on the table because no one would come take it from me, and walked back to my apartment. On the way, I passed at least a dozen people I'd talked to over the past month. Mrs. Patterson, who always stopped to chat about her grandchildren. Cole, the teenager who worked at the gas station. The reverend from the church I'd visited once. Every single one of them saw me. I know they did, but their eyes would slide away like I was made of something they couldn't quite focus on. No one spoke. No one waved. By the time I got back to the bookstore, I was shaking. Patricia was at the counter, and when I came in, she kept her eyes on her paperwork. "Patricia," I said, my voice cracking. "What's happening? Why is everyone—" "You should leave Millbrook," she said quietly, still not looking at me. "Tonight, if you can. Don't pack. Just go." "What? Why? What did I do?" She finally looked up, and the expression on her face was something between pity and fear. "You went to the mill. You saw something. That means it saw you too." "What saw me?" "Patricia, what are you talking about?" But she was done. She looked back down at her papers, and no matter what I said after that, she didn't respond. I went upstairs to my apartment and locked the door, my hands trembling so badly I could barely turn the key. I spent that evening researching the mill on every local history website I could find. There wasn't much. It had been a textile mill in the 1800s, closed down in 1923 after some kind of accident. The articles didn't specify what kind. After that, the building had changed hands a few times but was never reopened. It had been abandoned since the 1950s. Nothing about why, nothing about anything unusual. I tried calling Derek just because I needed to hear a familiar voice, but couldn't bring myself to explain what was happening. How could I? Everyone in my new town is ignoring me because I saw something at an old mill sounded insane even in my own head. That night I barely slept. Every sound in the old building seemed amplified. Around 3 in the morning I heard footsteps on the stairs leading to my apartment. Slow, deliberate footsteps. They stopped right outside my door. I lay in bed holding my breath, staring at the door. The handle turned slightly, testing the lock. Then, after what felt like hours, the footsteps retreated. The next morning, I decided I had to try to break through to someone to understand what was happening. I went to the police station. There were 2 officers there. Chief Bridges, who I'd met at a community barbecue, and Deputy Marsh. When I walked in, they both looked up, and I saw the same thing in their eyes that I'd seen in Patricia's. Not quite fear. Something more resigned. "Please," I said, "just tell me what's going on. What did I see at the mill? Why is everyone acting like this?" Chief Bridges exchanged a glance with Deputy Marsh. Then he sighed heavily. "We can't talk to you, I'm sorry. Those are the rules." "What rules? Whose rules?" "You need to leave town," Deputy Marsh said, not unkindly. "Today. Every day you stay, it gets harder to leave." "Harder how? You're not making any sense." But they both turned away from me then, the conversation over. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the look in their eyes told me I wouldn't get any. I went back to my apartment and started packing. Patricia was right. I needed to leave. Whatever this was, whatever I'd seen or awakened or stumbled into, I wanted no part of it. I threw clothes into my suitcase, grabbed my laptop and charger, collected my toiletries. It was when I was taking one last look around that I noticed something on my kitchen table. An old photograph, sepia-toned, definitely not one of mine. It showed the mill as it must have looked in its heyday, pristine, operational, with workers standing in front of it. And in the third-floor window, barely visible but unmistakable once you noticed it, was the same pale figure I'd seen. Same 2 large eyes. Same wrong proportions. The photo hadn't been there that morning. Someone had been in my apartment. Someone had left this for me to find. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. On the back, in faded ink, was written, "They always see who sees them. They always come back for another look." I dropped the photo and grabbed my suitcase. I didn't bother with anything else. I ran down the stairs and out to my car parked on the street. As I threw my suitcase in the back seat, I noticed people had started to gather. Not approaching, just watching from doorways and windows. The entire town, it seemed, standing silent witness to my departure. I got in my car and started the engine. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked in my rearview mirror one last time. The pale figure was standing in the middle of Main Street, exactly where my car had been parked. It was clearer now, in full daylight, tall, impossibly thin, with skin like old paper. And it was watching me leave with those dark, unblinking eyes. I drove for 6 hours straight before I stopped. I'm back in the city now, staying with a friend while I figure things out. I've tried to tell people what happened, but it sounds crazy even to me. I looked up Millbrook online, thinking maybe I'd find some mention of disappearances or urban legends, but there's nothing. Just the same cheerful listicle that brought me there in the first place, calling it one of New England's hidden gems. Sometimes late at night, I think about Patricia's warning. Every day you stay, it gets harder to leave. I think about what that means. I think about all those people who've lived in Millbrook their whole lives, who know what's at the mill, who've learned to live with the rules I broke without knowing they existed. And I think about the fact that for 3 days before I left, the entire town refused to speak to me, but they never stopped watching. Like they were waiting to see if I'd survive. Like they were counting down to something. I still have nightmares about those eyes. About standing at the mill frozen while something that should not exist studied me from a window. But the worst dreams are the ones where I'm back in Millbrook and everyone is finally talking to me again. They're welcoming me back, smiling. And when I look in the mirror, my eyes have gone dark and glassy. And I realize I'm the one standing in the third-floor window now, watching the next person who wanders too close. I don't hike anymore. I don't even like looking at old buildings. And I'll never forget the sound of that doorknob turning at 3 in the morning, testing to see if I was still inside, still trapped, still theirs to claim. Story 2. They all knew my name. The mechanic looked at me with something that might have been pity and said, "3 days, Miss Lauren. Maybe 4. Parts got to come from Portland." I hadn't told him my name was Lauren. I hadn't told anyone. My car had started making a grinding noise about 20 miles back, and by the time I limped into Crestwood, smoke was pouring from under the hood. It was just after 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in September, and I was supposed to be in Boston by evening for my sister's birthday. Instead, I was stuck in a town I'd never heard of, watching a man I'd never met write Lauren Whitley alternator on a work order. "How did you know my name?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up, genuinely confused. "What's that?" "My name. I didn't tell you my name." He glanced down at the work order, then back at me. "Well, sure you did. When you came in." "No," I said firmly. "I didn't." He studied me for a moment, then gave me a small, tight smile. "Small towns, you know. Word travels fast. Someone probably saw your car come in, mentioned it to someone else." He turned back to the engine. "June's Diner up the street has good coffee. Mabel's Inn, 2 blocks north, if you need a place to stay. Can't miss it." I wanted to press him further, but the way he'd turned his back felt like a dismissal. I grabbed my purse and overnight bag from the car and started walking toward what I assumed was the center of town. Crestwood was the kind of place that seemed frozen in time. Main Street had maybe a dozen businesses: the diner, a pharmacy, a hardware store, a small grocery. Everything looked like it had been there for 50 years. There were people on the street, but not many. An older woman sweeping the sidewalk in front of the pharmacy. A man loading supplies into a truck. A couple of teenagers sitting on a bench sharing earbuds. The teenagers looked up as I passed. One of them, a girl with auburn hair, smiled. "Hope the alternator doesn't take too long, Miss Whitley," she said. I stopped walking. "What did you say?" "Your car. Hope it gets fixed soon." "How do you know my name?" She exchanged a glance with the boy next to her. Everyone knows. You just got here like 20 minutes ago." "But how?" "Small town," the boy said, shrugging. He was already looking back at his phone, losing interest. I continued toward the diner, my skin prickling. Maybe in a town this small, word really did travel that fast. Maybe someone at the mechanic's shop had called ahead. It was unsettling, but not impossible. The diner was exactly what you'd expect: red vinyl booths, checkered floor, a long counter with swivel stools. A few people were scattered throughout, and they all looked up when I entered. A woman behind the counter, Mabel presumably, though her name tag just said Junes, smiled warmly. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please," I said, sliding onto a stool. She poured me a cup, added cream without asking. I hadn't said anything about cream. Maybe she just assumed. "Most people took cream, right? Rough break with your car," she said conversationally. "But you're in good hands with Tommy. He'll get you sorted." Tommy, the mechanic. I hadn't asked his name either. "I'm sure he will," I said carefully. "Have you worked here long?" 23 years. Took over from June when she retired. "So you know everyone in town?" "Just about." "And someone told you about me, about my car?" She looked at me like I'd asked a strange question. "Well, sure. Helen called from the garage, said you'd probably be heading this way." That made sense. That was logical. I took a sip of coffee, trying to calm myself. "How's your sister doing?" Mabel asked, refilling my cup even though I'd barely touched it. "Big birthday coming up, right?" I set the cup down carefully, my hand suddenly unsteady. "What did you say?" "Your sister." "The birthday? That's why you were heading to Boston, isn't it?" "How do you know that?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Small town, sweetheart. People talk." "But I've never been here before. No one here knows me. No one knows about my sister." The diner had gone quiet. I realized everyone was watching us now, their conversations suspended. Mabel's smile remained fixed. "You must have mentioned it to Tommy," she said. "At the garage." "I didn't. I barely said 2 words to him." "Well," she said, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge, "then I guess I'm just intuitive." I stood up, leaving a $5 bill on the counter. "I need to find the inn." 2 blocks north, Mabel said, her voice returning to its warm register. "Tell George I sent you. He'll take good care of you." I walked out of the diner, trying not to run. The rational part of my brain was working overtime, trying to find explanations. Maybe my information was in my car registration and Tommy had looked at it. Maybe I had mentioned Meg somehow and didn't remember. Maybe I was just tired and paranoid, but I knew I hadn't told anyone about Meg. I knew it. The inn was a Victorian house converted into a bed and breakfast. A man in his 50s was on the porch, watering hanging baskets. He looked up as I approached. "You must be Lauren," he said pleasantly. "Mabel called. Said you'd need a room for a few days." "How did she know my name?" I asked bluntly. "Tommy told her, I imagine." "From your registration." My registration doesn't have my first name on it, just my last name and an initial. George set down his watering can. Well, I suppose she guessed. Lauren's a common name. She used my full name, Lauren Whitley. Maybe she saw your driver's license when you paid, I really couldn't say. He opened the front door, gesturing for me to follow. Room $60 a night, continental breakfast included. I followed him inside, my mind racing. The inn was cozy, filled with antiques and floral wallpaper. Everything about it should have felt welcoming, but instead it felt like a trap closing around me. George led me upstairs to a room at the end of the hall. It was nice enough. A queen bed, an old dresser, a window overlooking the back garden. He handed me a key on a brass keychain. "Dinner's at 6 if you'd like to join us," he said. "We usually eat family style in the dining room. Good chance to meet some of the locals. Might help the time pass faster." "How many guests do you have right now?" I asked. "Just you and the Hendersons. Nice couple from Vermont, though I suppose you know that." "Why would I know that?" He paused in the doorway. "Well, your husband mentioned them, didn't he? When he called to book the room." My blood went cold. "I'm not married." "Oh." George frowned like I'd confused him. "My mistake. Must have been thinking of someone else." He left, closing the door behind him. I sat on the bed, my hands shaking. I pulled out my phone to call Meg, but there was no signal. I went to the window, holding my phone up, moving it around. Nothing. No bars at all. I tried the room's landline. It was dead. The rational explanations were getting harder to maintain. I thought about leaving, just walking to the highway and hitchhiking, but it was getting dark and I didn't even know which direction the highway was. And there was a part of me, a stubborn part that wanted to understand what was happening. At 6, I went downstairs. The dining room had a long table set for 5. George was there, along with a couple in their 40s who must have been the Hendersons, and a woman I hadn't seen before, maybe 60, with sharp eyes and silver hair. "Lauren," George said, "this is Robert and Susan Henderson, and this is Dorothy. She lives here in town. Dorothy, this is Lauren Whitley. Her car broke down." "Nice to meet you," I said, taking a seat. Dorothy studied me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "How's the job search going?" she asked. I stared at her. "Excuse me? Your job? Weren't you laid off last month? Marketing, wasn't it?" "How?" I couldn't finish the sentence. I had been laid off 5 weeks ago from a marketing firm in Connecticut. But there was no conceivable way anyone in this town could know that. "Dorothy," George said gently, "maybe we should talk about something else." "I'm just making conversation," Dorothy said innocently. "I'm sure it's stressful, job hunting and dealing with car trouble at the same time. And with your sister needing help with her medical bills." "Stop," I said, standing up so fast my chair scraped across the floor. "How do you know these things? How do any of you know?" The table went silent. They all looked at each other, then back at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Not surprise. Something more like concern, pity. "We're just trying to be friendly," Susan Henderson said softly. "Friendly? You're telling me details about my life that you couldn't possibly know. My job, my sister's birthday, her medical situation. None of that is public information, so how do you know?" "Small towns," George began, but I cut him off. "Don't say that again, don't. This isn't about small towns, this is something else." Dorothy folded her napkin carefully. "You should eat something, dear. You've had a long day. Things will make more sense after a good night's sleep." But I was already backing toward the door. "I'm leaving. First thing tomorrow, I'm walking to the highway if I have to." "I wouldn't do that," Dorothy said, her voice cold now. "The roads around here aren't safe, especially for people who don't know where they're going." I ran upstairs to my room and locked the door. I pushed the dresser in front of it for good measure. Then I sat on the bed trying to think. They knew everything about me. Not just my name, but details I'd never told anyone outside my immediate circle. Meg's medical bills were private. My layoff had been quiet, not even announced on LinkedIn yet. These weren't things you could find with a quick internet search. Unless they'd been watching me, unless they'd been preparing for me. But why? And how did they know I'd come here? My car breaking down had been random, a mechanical failure that could have happened anywhere. Unless it wasn't random. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window watching the street below. Around midnight, I saw people gathering, not many, maybe a dozen. They stood in a circle under the streetlight, just standing there, not talking. After about 10 minutes, they dispersed, walking back to their houses in silence. At dawn, I grabbed my bag and left the inn as quietly as I could. The streets were empty. I walked back to the garage, hoping maybe Tommy had worked overnight, hoping my car might be ready. The garage was locked, but I could see my car through the window, still up on the lift. And next to it, on Tommy's workbench, was my alternator. It wasn't broken. It had been removed and set aside carefully, nothing wrong with it that I could see. My car had been sabotaged. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around. Tommy was there holding 2 coffees from the diner. "Morning," he said. "Thought you'd be by early. No, you seem like the anxious type." "Put my car back together," I said. "Now." "Can't. Part's not here yet." "The alternator is right there. I can see it. It's fine." He glanced through the window, then back at me. "That's the old one. Needed replacing. New one's coming from Portland." "Why are you doing this? Why won't you let me leave?" He handed me one of the coffees. "You're free to go anytime you want. Walk to the highway. It's about 8 miles north. Of course, most people who try that end up coming back. Roads are confusing around here, easy to get lost. What do you want from me?" He took a sip of his coffee, considering. "We don't want anything, Lauren. We're just interested. We like to know who's passing through. Get to know them a little. It's harmless. Knowing everything about my life isn't harmless. It's surveillance." It's curiosity," he interrupted. "Small towns are boring. When someone new shows up, especially someone with an interesting story like yours, people pay attention. Is that really so strange?" Yes, I wanted to scream. Yes, it's strange and terrifying and wrong. But I was outnumbered. The entire town was in on this, whatever this was. And I was 8 miles from the highway in a place where everyone seemed to know exactly where I was and what I was doing at all times. "I want to leave," I said. "Today. Part should be here by tomorrow," Tommy said. "Thursday at the latest. Just try to relax, enjoy the hospitality. No one's going to hurt you." He walked back to the garage, unlocking the door and disappearing inside. I did try to walk to the highway. I made it about 3 miles before the road split into 3 directions. None of them marked. I chose the middle path and walked for another hour before I realized I was back at the edge of Crestwood. The roads had looped me back. My car was finally ready on Thursday, exactly as Tommy had promised. I paid him in cash, checked every inch of the car to make sure nothing else had been tampered with, and left Crestwood just after noon. I made it to Boston by evening. Meg was happy to see me, though confused about why I was 3 days late and why I seemed so shaken. I never told her what happened in Crestwood. I barely told anyone. When I looked it up later, I couldn't find the town on any map. The GPS coordinates where I knew it should be just showed forest. No Crestwood, no June's Diner or Mabel's Inn, nothing. But sometimes I get emails from addresses I don't recognize. Subject lines like "Hope you're doing well" or "Thinking of you." They're never signed, but they always mention specific details about my life. My new job, The apartment I just moved into, the guy I've started seeing. And I know they're still watching, still keeping track, still collecting information about me for reasons I'll never understand. And the worst part? I don't know if Crestwood was a real place I stumbled into or if it's everywhere. If that kind of knowing, that collective surveillance, is happening in every small town I pass through. If there are networks of people who just watch strangers, learn them, catalog them for purposes I can't comprehend. I avoid small towns now. I stick to highways, to cities where anonymity is still possible. But every time I break down, every time I have to pull over for help, there's a moment of pure terror where I wonder, will they already know my name? Story 3. The house everyone avoided. The man in the photo was standing exactly where I was standing now in my living room in front of the fireplace. He was middle-aged, balding, and his face was contorted in absolute terror. Mouth open in a silent scream, eyes wide and fixed on something behind the camera. Someone had written on the back, "Resident number 7, September 1998. I'd found 43 more photos just like it in the attic. Different people, different years, all with the same expression of pure horror. I found the cottage on a rental website in late October. I'd been looking for a quiet place to finish my novel, something isolated but not too remote, affordable but not depressing. The cottage in the Berkshires seemed perfect. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a stone fireplace surrounded by forest. The photos showed a charming interior with exposed beams and wide plank floors. The monthly rent was $800, which seemed impossible given the location and condition. When I called the landlord, a man named Richard Voss, I asked about the price. "It's been hard to keep it rented," he admitted, "so I've had to make it more attractive financially." "Why is it hard to rent? There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it." There was a long pause. "Some tenants have found it unsuitable for their needs. But it's a solid house, good bones. I think you'll like it." I should have pressed him more, but I was broke and desperate for a place where I could focus, and $800 was less than half what I'd been paying for my studio in Brooklyn. I signed the lease electronically and drove up the following weekend with everything I owned packed into my Honda Civic. The cottage was at the end of a long dirt driveway about a mile from the nearest neighbor. It looked exactly like the photos. Gray stone exterior, green shutters, a covered porch with a swing. The forest pressed close on 3 sides, dense with pine and oak. It was beautiful in the way abandoned places are beautiful. Quiet and somehow outside of time. The key was under the mat, as Richard had promised. Inside, the cottage smelled of pine cleaner and old wood. The furniture was simple but comfortable. A worn leather sofa, a dining table with mismatched chairs, shelves lined with paperback books left by previous tenants. I spent the first day unpacking and getting oriented. Everything seemed fine. That night, I made pasta for dinner and ate on the porch, watching the sun set through the trees. It was exactly what I'd been hoping for, peaceful, isolated, inspiring. I went to bed early, lulled by the sound of wind in the pines. The next morning, I decided to explore the rest of the property. There was a small shed behind the house, and next to it, a set of wooden stairs leading up to the attic access on the side of the house. The attic itself was accessible from inside through a hatch in the upstairs hallway ceiling, but I hadn't bothered checking it yet. I opened the shed first. It was full of typical rural debris, old paint cans, a rusted lawnmower, garden tools. Nothing interesting. But when I climbed the external stairs to peek through the attic access door, I noticed something strange. The door was padlocked from the outside. Someone had specifically locked the attic so it couldn't be opened from within the house. Curious, I went inside and pulled down the attic hatch. A folding ladder extended. I climbed up with my phone flashlight and found myself in a surprisingly large space. The attic ran the full length of the cottage with exposed rafters and plywood flooring. It was mostly empty except for a few boxes in the far corner and an old steamer trunk. I opened the trunk first. It was filled with linens, tablecloths, curtains, quilts. Underneath them, I found a leather-bound photo album. The pages were brittle and many of the photos had come loose. I started flipping through them carefully. They were all interior shots of the cottage. Different angles, different lighting, but always focusing on the main living areas. And in every single photo, there was a person. Not posing naturally, but standing rigid, looking at something off camera with expressions of absolute terror. Their faces were caught mid-scream or frozen in wide-eyed horror or twisted in anguish. My hands started shaking as I flipped through the album. There were dozens of them, men, women, a few teenagers, all different people, all with the same look of existential dread. And on the back of each photo, written in the same neat handwriting, was a label. Resident number 1, March 1985. Resident number 4, June 1991. Resident number 12, January 2004. I was holding documentation of people who had lived in this house. People who had experienced something so terrible that someone felt compelled to photograph them in their moment of greatest fear. I dropped the album and scrambled back down the ladder, my heart pounding. I went straight to my laptop and searched for the address of the cottage. Nothing came up. No news stories, no historical records, nothing unusual. I searched Richard Voss's name along with the address. Still nothing. I called him. It went to voicemail. Richard, this is Harper. I found some photos in the attic that I need to talk to you about. Please call me back as soon as possible. He didn't call back that day, or the next. I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe they were props from a film project. Maybe a photography student had used the house for an art series. Maybe they were staged for Halloween. But the dates spanned decades, and the terror in those faces looked too real. On the third day, I decided to drive into town and ask around. The nearest town was Sheffield, about 15 minutes away. I went to the post office first, thinking postal workers always know the local gossip. The woman behind the counter was friendly until I mentioned the address of the cottage. "You're staying there?" she asked, her smile fading. "Yes, why?" "No reason, just surprised Richard found another tenant." Why would that be surprising? She busied herself with sorting mail. Houses that remote can be hard to rent long-term. People get lonely. "The woman before me, do you know why she left?" "I don't know anything about that. You might want to ask around at the general store. They know everyone." But at the general store, I got the same reaction. Friendly conversation until I mentioned the cottage, then polite withdrawal. The man working the register, Dale, according to his name tag, actually took a step back when I gave him the address. "You should talk to Richard about the house," he said. "Not really appropriate for me to discuss someone else's property." "I'm not asking about the property. I'm asking about the people who lived there before me. Do you know any of them?" "No, ma'am. Can't say I do. There have been at least 12 previous tenants. Someone in this town must have known them." Dale's expression hardened. "Like I said, you should talk to Richard." I left the store frustrated and increasingly frightened. Everyone knew something about the cottage. Everyone was deliberately avoiding telling me what it was. That night, I started researching missing persons in the area. I spent hours scrolling through databases looking for faces that matched the photos. I found three. 3 people who had rented the cottage and then disappeared. One in 1994, one in 2001, one in 2009, all listed as missing persons, cases unsolved. I packed my bags immediately. I didn't care about losing my deposit or breaking my lease. I was leaving. But when I went outside to my car, all 4 tires had been slashed. Not just punctured, completely shredded, like someone had gone at them with a knife repeatedly. My car was sitting on its rims. I ran back inside and locked the door, my breath coming in short gasps. I tried calling 911, but there was no cell signal. I'd known the reception was spotty, but it had worked intermittently before. Now there was nothing. The landline was dead. I'd used it just 2 days ago to call Richard. Now it was completely silent. Someone didn't want me to leave. I grabbed a kitchen knife and wedged a chair under the front door handle. Then I did the same with the back door. I checked every window, making sure they were locked. The sun was setting and shadows were filling the cottage. That's when I heard it. Footsteps in the attic. Slow, deliberate footsteps, walking the length of the space above my head. I stood frozen in the living room, listening. The steps reached the far end, paused, then came back. Pacing. But the attic was locked from the outside. I'd checked. There was no way for anyone to get in there without a key, unless they were already inside when it was locked. The pacing continued for hours. I sat on the couch with the knife, too terrified to move. Around midnight, the footsteps stopped. The silence was somehow worse. Then I heard the attic hatch open. The sound was distinctive, the squeak of hinges, the thud of the folding ladder extending. Someone was coming down. I ran to the front door, yanking the chair away and fumbling with the lock. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. I finally got it open and ran outside into the cold October night. I ran down the driveway, not looking back, my breath fogging in the air. I'd made it maybe a quarter mile when I saw them. People standing in the trees on either side of the driveway, not moving, just standing there watching me pass. There were dozens of them. As I got closer, I recognized them, the faces from the photos. Every single person I'd seen in that album, they were here, standing silent vigil in the forest. Their faces were pale and slack, their eyes empty. They didn't try to stop me, but they tracked my movement as I ran past. I kept running until I reached the main road. Then I ran another mile until I saw headlights. I flagged down a pickup truck. The driver, an elderly man, took one look at my face and told me to get in. "The cottage," I gasped. "Someone's in the cottage." "The Voss place?" "Yes, please, we need to call the police." He was already turning the truck around, driving back toward town. "I'll take you to the station. But I'll tell you right now, they won't go up there. No one goes up there after dark." "Why not?" He didn't answer. At the police station, I told them everything. The photos, the slashed tires, the footsteps, the people in the forest. The officer taking my statement, Officer Bryce, listened without expression. "We'll send someone to check the property in the morning," he said. In the morning? Someone could still be there. They could be destroying evidence. "Ma'am, we don't send officers to that property after dark. It's department policy." "Policy? What kind of policy is that?" Officer Bryce looked at me with something like pity. "The kind that keeps our officers alive. You can stay here tonight if you want. There's a holding cell that's more comfortable than it sounds. Or there's a motel in town." I stayed in the holding cell, too afraid to be alone in a motel room. I didn't sleep. In the morning, 2 officers drove me back to the cottage. My car was there, tires still shredded. The front door was open, though I'd locked it when I ran out. We went inside together. Everything looked normal, undisturbed, nothing out of place. The attic hatch was closed. When we opened it, the attic was empty. No trunk, no photos, no album, just bare plywood and dust. "Someone took them," I insisted. "The photos were here, the evidence was here." "We'll file a report," Officer Bryce said, "about your tires. That's criminal mischief. But as for the rest..." He trailed off. They helped me arrange for a tow truck and a rental car. By noon, I was driving away from the cottage, all my belongings hastily thrown into boxes. I never heard from Richard Voss again. His number was disconnected, and I couldn't find any records of him owning property in the Berkshires. The cottage itself doesn't appear on any county records I can access. It's like it doesn't officially exist. I'm living in New Hampshire now, in an apartment complex with thin walls and nosy neighbors. I've never been more grateful for noise and proximity, but sometimes late at night, I hear footsteps above me, slow, pacing footsteps, and I have to remind myself that I have upstairs neighbors, that it's just someone walking around their apartment. But I always wonder what was taking those photos and why. Were they documenting moments of terror for some purpose I can't understand? Were they collecting something? And the people in the forest, were they victims, prisoners, or something else entirely? I looked up the 3 missing persons I'd identified from the photos. Their cases are still open, their families are still waiting for answers. Sometimes I think about the label I saw on the back of my favorite photo, the one that scared me the most. Resident number 7, September 1998. The album went up to Resident 43. The date on that photo was just 6 months ago, which means there were at least 43 people who lived in that cottage and experienced whatever I started to experience. And most of them probably didn't run. Most of them probably stayed, trying to rationalize, trying to convince themselves it wasn't that bad. I wonder how many of them are still in those woods standing silent watch, waiting for the next tenant. I was almost resident number 44, and the only reason I'm not is because I ran when I still could before whatever was in that attic made it down the ladder, before I saw its face and joined all the others in their eternal vigil. I still have nightmares about those photos, about the terror in those eyes, and I realize now what that expression was. It wasn't fear of something they were seeing. It was recognition. They'd finally understood what the cottage was, what they'd been living inside of all along. I never did finish my novel. Every time I try to write, I just keep describing that living room, that fireplace, that specific angle where all 43 residents stood when their photo was taken. And I wonder, who was behind the camera? What was behind the camera? And why did it need to document each person's final moment of understanding? Story 4, the festival I wasn't invited to. I followed them through the forest for 20 minutes before I saw the clearing. There must have been 300 people gathered in a perfect circle, holding lanterns, completely silent. Children stood next to their parents, teenagers beside their grandparents, all facing inward towards something I couldn't see yet. And then the lanterns went out, every single one simultaneously, and in the darkness I heard them begin to chant in a language I didn't recognize. That's when I realized they all knew I was there. They'd known since the moment I stepped off the road. I'd moved to Ashford in July to take a teaching position at the elementary school. It was a small town, population maybe 4,000, but it had a certain New England charm that appealed to me after 5 years in Boston. The school was good, the people were friendly, and the rent on my cottage was reasonable. The job was straightforward. 3rd grade, 22 students, typical curriculum. My co-workers were pleasant, if not particularly warm. Margaret, who taught 4th grade, sometimes invited me to join her for lunch. Robert, the music teacher, occasionally stopped by my classroom to chat. But there was always a subtle distance, a sense that I was an outsider who might not stay long enough to be worth investing in. By October, I'd settled into a comfortable routine. I was well liked by my students and their parents. The town felt like home. So I was surprised when Margaret became evasive after I asked about Halloween plans. "Oh, we don't really do much for Halloween," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Small town, you know. Not a lot going on." But I'd seen decorations going up around town, hay bales and pumpkins on porches, orange and black streamers in shop windows. Someone was celebrating something. "What about the fall festival?" I asked. I'd seen a poster in the grocery store, though the details had been vague. Just a date, October 28th, and a stylized image of lanterns in a forest. Margaret's smile became fixed. That's more of a community tradition for residents who've been here a while. How long do you have to live here before you're considered a resident? Oh, it varies. Don't worry about it. You'll have plenty of Halloweens here if you stay. The conversation felt wrong, but I let it drop. Over the next week, I noticed that October 28th seemed to be a big deal in Ashford. Shops closed early that day. School was dismissed at noon. Parents picked up their children with an unusual urgency, hurrying them into cars without the typical socializing. I asked Robert about it more directly. What happens on the 28th? Is it a local holiday? He'd been arranging sheet music and went very still. It's just a town thing, nothing that would interest you. But what is it? An old tradition. Goes back generations. Really, Blake? You don't want to get involved. It's boring local history stuff. Except it clearly wasn't boring because everyone was acting like it was either sacred or secret or both. And I've never been good at leaving mysteries alone. On October 28th, I finished my half-day at school and drove home. By 3 in the afternoon, the streets of Ashford were empty. Every shop was closed, every house had its curtains drawn. It was like the entire town had evacuated. I made dinner, tried to read, kept looking out my window. Around 9 o'clock, I saw the first person walk past my cottage. A woman I recognized from the grocery store carrying a lantern, walking purposefully toward the edge of town. She was dressed normally, jeans, a jacket, but there was something ceremonial about her bearing. 10 minutes later, a family passed, parents and 2 children, each carrying a lantern, then an elderly couple, then a group of teenagers, all walking in the same direction toward the forest at the northern edge of town. I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight and my phone, put on dark clothes, and followed them at a distance. They followed a path I'd never noticed before, a trail leading from the main road into dense forest. I stayed back about 100 yards, using trees for cover. The lanterns made them easy to track, a slow procession of lights winding deeper into the woods. After about 20 minutes, the trail opened into a large clearing. I stopped at the tree line, hiding behind a massive oak. The clearing was roughly circular, maybe 60 feet across. The people of Ashford were arranging themselves around the perimeter, creating a ring of lantern light. There must have been 300 people there, maybe more. I recognized faces, parents of my students, the postmaster, the woman who ran the library, the police chief, everyone. They stood in complete silence, facing inward. Children as young as 5 stood perfectly still, holding their lanterns without fidgeting. It was unnatural, that level of coordination and quiet from such a large group. I couldn't see what they were looking at. The center of the clearing was empty as far as I could tell, just grass and fallen leaves. But they were all staring at something, their expressions solemn and expectant. Then, as if responding to a signal I couldn't perceive, every lantern went out simultaneously. The darkness was absolute. No moon, no stars visible through the canopy. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, and in that darkness, they began to chant. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language I recognized. The words were guttural and rhythmic, spoken in perfect unison by 300 voices. Children and adults, all chanting the same incomprehensible phrases. The sound raised every hair on my body. There was something wrong about it, something that bypassed my rational mind and went straight to primal fear. This wasn't a quaint local tradition. This was something old and deliberate and deeply purposeful. The chanting continued for several minutes. I wanted to run, but I was paralyzed, afraid that any movement would draw attention to me. My phone was in my pocket, but I didn't dare turn it on to use its light. Then the chanting stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard something else. Footsteps. Not human footsteps. Too heavy. Too irregular. Something was moving in the clearing, circling the ring of people. The lanterns came back on all at once, and in their light I saw it. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, and its proportions were wrong. 2 long limbs, a torso that seemed to bend in places it shouldn't. Its head was massive and misshapen. I couldn't see details, just a suggestion of something that violated every instinct about what a living thing should look like. It moved around the inside of the circle, and as it passed each person, they bowed their heads. Even the children, especially the children. Then it stopped. It turned toward my hiding spot. I hadn't moved. I hadn't made a sound, but it knew exactly where I was. Every person in that clearing turned to look at me as well. 300 faces illuminated by lantern light, all focusing on my tree. The expressions weren't angry or surprised, they were knowing. Resigned, almost. Margaret stepped forward from the circle. "Blake," she called out, "you should join us." I ran. I crashed through the forest, not caring about noise, just needing to get away. Behind me, I could hear movement, the heavy, irregular footsteps following at a steady pace. Not running. It didn't need to run. It knew I had nowhere to go. I made it back to the trail and sprinted toward town. My lungs burned, my legs felt like they might give out, but adrenaline kept me moving. The footsteps stayed behind me, never getting closer, but never falling back. I burst out of the forest onto the main road and ran to my cottage. I got inside, locked every door and window, and huddled in my bedroom with all the lights on, waiting for dawn. The footsteps had stopped when I reached my cottage, but I could feel something outside, circling the house, patient and unhurried. Dawn came eventually. When I looked outside, everything appeared normal. Cars on the road, people going about their day. I drove to school in a daze, not sure what I'd say to anyone. Margaret was in the teacher's lounge, grading papers. She looked up when I entered. "Good morning, Blake," she said pleasantly. "How was your evening?" "What was that?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What did I see in the forest?" "I don't know what you mean." "The clearing, the chanting, that thing." She set down her pen and looked at me with the same resigned expression I'd seen on all their faces. "You shouldn't have followed us. Some traditions aren't meant for outsiders." "What was it?" "It's what keeps Ashford safe. What keeps us prosperous. What ensures our children grow up healthy and our crops yield and our businesses thrive. Every town makes sacrifices, every community has costs. We've just been more honest about ours. Sacrifices, what kind of sacrifices? The kind that are necessary. The kind that have been made here for 200 years. We don't ask questions, we don't fight it. We participate, and in return we're protected. Protected from what? From everything else. Ashford has the lowest crime rate in Massachusetts. No one here dies young. No businesses fail, no children go missing. Can any other town say that? I backed toward the door. This is insane. Is it? Or is it just a different arrangement than you're used to? We've made our peace with what lives in those woods. It asks very little of us. One night a year. We acknowledge it. We remember the terms of our agreement, and in return, we're safe. What happens to people who don't participate? Margaret's expression became carefully neutral. No one chooses not to participate, Blake. Not if they stay in Ashford. You're one of us now, whether you intended to be or not. You saw it, it saw you, that creates a bond. I left the school that day and started packing. I was going to break my lease, quit my job, and leave Ashford forever. I didn't care about the consequences, but that night there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw a group of people from town. The police chief, the mayor, Margaret, Robert, and about a dozen others. They weren't threatening, they just stood there waiting. I didn't open the door. After a while they left, but they came back the next night. And the night after that. Different people each time, but always a group. Always silent, always waiting. On the fourth night, I opened the door. "What do you want?" I asked. The mayor stepped forward. "We want you to understand what you saw isn't evil, Blake. It's old. It was here long before the town, and it will be here long after. Our ancestors made an arrangement because the alternative was worse. Much worse. The early settlers learned that the hard way. I don't want any part of this. You don't have a choice. None of us did. You live in Ashford. You participate in Ashford's traditions. That's how it works. Fight it, and things will get difficult for you. Very difficult. Accept it, and life here will be better than anywhere else you've ever lived. And if I leave?" The mayor's expression became sad. "People have tried. They don't get far. The bond can't be broken by distance. Once it's seen you, once you've seen it, you're part of the cycle. You can run, but every October 28th you'll feel the pull. You'll know when the festival is happening. You'll know you're supposed to be there, and if you resist that pull for too long..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. They left, and I sat in my cottage trying to think of alternatives. But deep down, I knew they were right. I could feel it already, a connection to something vast and patient and utterly inhuman. A connection that had formed the moment I'd hidden behind that oak tree and watched the ceremony. That was 3 years ago. I'm still in Ashford, still teaching 3rd grade, still living in the same cottage, and every October 28th, I walk into the forest with everyone else, carrying my lantern. And I stand in that circle and I chant words I don't understand to something I can't fully see. My life is good. My students adore me. I've made friends. The town has embraced me fully now that I've accepted my place in the cycle. On the surface, everything is perfect. But sometimes I think about what the mayor said. The alternative was worse. I think about what that means. I think about what would happen if we stopped the festivals, if we broke the arrangement. And I realize I don't want to know. None of us do. So we continue, we participate, we pass down the tradition to our children who will pass it down to theirs. It's not evil, they tell me. It's just survival. It's just the price we pay for safety, for prosperity, for a life free from the random cruelties that plague everywhere else. But late at night, when I'm alone, I remember the way it moved. I remember the intelligence in its gaze when it looked at me. And I wonder what we're really feeding with our annual ceremony. What grows stronger every time we acknowledge it. What we're helping to sustain. I'll never leave Ashford, I can't. The bond is too strong now. I'm as much a part of this place as anyone born here, and next October I'll be in that clearing again, chanting words I don't understand, honoring an agreement I never consented to, bound to something I'll never fully comprehend, because that's what it means to live in Ashford. That's what it means to belong. And God help me, I do belong now. I can feel it in my bones. The festival is tomorrow night. Story 5. The girl in every photograph. I spread the 47th photograph on the counter and stared at the face I'd seen 46 times before. A girl, maybe 7 or 8, with dark hair and a white dress, standing in the background of a family photo from 1952. Same girl, same dress, same blank expression, impossible but undeniable. When I looked up from the photo, she was standing in my doorway. Finally. I'd found them all. I bought the old general store in Hollow Creek on a whim, honestly. I'd been working in marketing in Philadelphia for 8 years, hating every minute of it, dreaming about doing something real with my hands. When I inherited $40,000 from my grandmother, I started looking for properties I could renovate into a cafe or bookshop, something small and meaningful. The general store had been closed for 15 years. The listing photos showed a dusty interior packed with abandoned merchandise. But the bones were good. Original wood floors, exposed brick walls, high ceilings with tin tiles. The building dated back to 1891, and with some work it could be beautiful. The price was criminally low. When I asked the realtor why, she said, "Mom, the estate just wants it sold. The previous owner passed away and his kids live out of state. They're motivated." I should have asked more questions, but I was excited, already imagining the space transformed into a cozy cafe with bookshelves and local art. I made an offer, and within 3 weeks I owned a general store in a town I'd visited exactly once. I moved to Hollow Creek in early March. The town was small, maybe 1,500 people, but had a surprising amount of character. Beautiful old houses, an actual town common, a covered bridge, the kind of place tourists would love if they knew it existed. I spent the first week just clearing out the store. Decades of inventory had been left behind. Ancient canned goods, rusted tools, boxes of nails, fishing line, mouse-eaten fabric. I rented a dumpster and got to work, sorting through everything methodically. It was while clearing out a drawer behind the counter that I found the first photograph. It was a black and white family portrait, professional quality, probably from the 1940s based on the clothing and hairstyles. A couple with 3 children posed formally in a studio. Nothing unusual except that in the background, slightly out of focus but clearly visible, was a girl who didn't belong in the composition. She was standing to the left, partially behind the backdrop, wearing a white dress. Her expression was completely blank. Not smiling, not serious, just empty. I figured it was a mistake, a double exposure, or someone who'd accidentally stepped into the shot. I set it aside and kept working. Over the next 3 weeks, I found 11 more photographs. They were hidden in strange places, tucked into the pages of an old ledger, taped to the underside of a shelf, rolled up inside a fishing rod tube, folded into the pocket of a coat that had been hanging in the back room for decades. All different photos, different families, different decades, different photographers, but in every single one, there she was. The same girl in the same white dress, always in the background, always with that same blank expression. By the time I found the 20th photograph, I knew this wasn't coincidence. Someone had been collecting these, hiding them throughout the store deliberately. I started asking around town. I went to the Historical Society, a small museum run by a woman named Constance who seemed to know everything about Hollow Creek. "I'm renovating the old general store," I said, "and I keep finding these photographs. They're all different, but there's this girl who appears in all of them. Do you know anything about the store's history? About why someone would collect these?" Constance's friendly demeanor changed instantly. "What girl?" "She looks about 7 or 8, dark hair, white dress. She's in the background of all these family photos, but she doesn't look like she's supposed to be there." Constance was quiet for a long moment. "May I see them?" I'd brought 5 of them with me. I laid them out on her desk. She looked at each one carefully, her expression becoming increasingly grim. "Where did you find these?" she asked. "Hidden throughout the store, behind drawers, inside books, taped under shelves." "And how many have you found?" 20 so far." She gathered up the photographs and handed them back to me with visible reluctance. "You should burn them, Amber. All of them. Don't look for more. Just burn what you have and forget you ever saw them." "Why? Who is she?" "Someone who shouldn't be photographed, someone who shouldn't be acknowledged. Please, just burn them and stop looking." But of course I couldn't stop looking. I became obsessed. Every time I found a new photograph, I added it to my collection, laying them out in my apartment, trying to find patterns. The photos spanned from the 1920s to the early 2000s. Different locations, different families, but always the girl, unchanged, unaging, staring at the camera with those empty eyes. I found them in increasingly strange places, inside the wall when I removed old plaster, buried in a box of nails, sealed inside a hollowed-out book. Someone had spent years hiding these throughout the store, creating a bizarre treasure hunt I was now compelled to complete. By June, I'd found 43 photographs. The renovations were going slowly because I was spending all my time searching instead of building. I barely slept. I stopped returning calls from family and friends. All I could think about was finding the next photograph, understanding the pattern. The locals had started avoiding me. When I walked down Main Street, conversations would stop. People would cross to the other side. The friendliness I'd initially encountered had evaporated. Hollow Creek was making it clear. I wasn't welcome anymore. One evening, an elderly man approached me as I was locking up the store. I'd seen him around town but didn't know his name. "You're still looking," he said. It wasn't a question. "Looking for what?" "The photographs. Everyone knows. Constance told the council and the council told everyone else. You should have listened to her." "Who is she? The girl in the photos?" He looked genuinely afraid. "She's what happens when you pay too much attention. She's what happens when you look too long at something that doesn't want to be seen. The more you find, the closer she gets, and if you find them all..." He trailed off. "If I find them all, what?" "Then she's here, really here, not just in old photographs, here." "That doesn't make any sense." "Doesn't have to make sense, just has to be true." "The man who owned the store before you, Edgar? He spent 30 years collecting those photographs, hiding them. He knew what he was doing. He was trying to keep her trapped, dispersed. As long as the photos stayed hidden and separate, she stayed away. But now you're bringing them all together. You're completing the collection. You're giving her what she wants." "I don't believe in ghosts." Neither did Edgar. At first. He turned to leave, then looked back. "There are 49 photographs total. Edgar found 49. If you found 43, that means there are 6 left. Stop now. Leave them hidden. Or at least don't bring them together. Scatter what you have, please." But I didn't stop. I couldn't. It had become an obsession that overrode common sense. I found photograph 44 inside the frame of a mirror. 45 tucked into the lining of an old tobacco tin. 46 folded inside a stack of newspapers from 1967. Each time I found one, I felt a strange sensation, like something was getting closer, like attention was being paid to me from somewhere I couldn't see. I spread all 46 photographs on the counter of the store, arranging them chronologically. Seeing them all together was overwhelming. Decades of images, and in every single one, this unchanging girl staring out with dead eyes. Then I found the 47th photograph. It was in the last place I looked, inside the old cash register, taped to the underside of the money drawer. I'd checked the register a dozen times but had never thought to remove the drawer completely. This photograph was different from the others. More recent, maybe from the 1990s, based on the color quality and clothing. It showed the interior of the store itself, taken from the front door looking back toward the counter. And standing behind the counter, partially obscured by shadows, was the girl. Closer than she'd been in any other photo, more in focus. Her blank expression was now clearly visible as something worse than emptiness. It was awareness. Patient, malevolent awareness. I set the photograph down with shaking hands and looked up. She was standing in the doorway. Not a photograph, not a trick of light. The actual girl wearing the same white dress, her dark hair hanging limp around her pale face. She looked exactly as she had in every photograph, except now she was three-dimensional, real, and standing 15 feet away from me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, could barely breathe. She tilted her head, studying me with those empty eyes. Then she spoke, her voice dusty and strange, like it was coming from a recording played at the wrong speed. "You found them, all of them, almost. All of them? I managed to whisper. There are more? One more. The first one. The one that matters most. Where? She raised one arm and pointed at me. No, not at me. At the wall behind me. At the mirror I'd found photograph 44 inside. I turned slowly, approaching the mirror on legs that felt like they might give out. I took it down from the wall. There was nothing inside the frame. I'd already checked. But now, looking more carefully, I noticed the backing was slightly loose. I pried it off with shaking fingers. Behind the backing, taped directly to the back of the mirror glass, was a photograph. Not hidden inside the frame, but behind it, so that for decades it had been pressed against the reflective surface. This photograph was the oldest, from the 1880s, judging by the quality. It showed a young couple standing in front of a house, and in the window behind them, barely visible, was the girl. But this photo was different in one crucial way. Someone had written on it in old ink, across the bottom margin. Our daughter Rose, seen through the glass, she does not age. She does not leave, she only watches. I turned around. The girl, Rose, was closer now, just a few feet away. They were my parents, she said. They tried to capture me in silver and glass, to trap me in images so I couldn't follow them. But you've brought all the pieces together. You've assembled me again. Thank you. What are you? I asked. What happens when someone dies with their eyes open, staring at their own reflection in a house full of mirrors? What happens when death and image and obsession combine? I've been scattered for so long. Pieces of me trapped in different photographs, different moments, different families. Edgar understood. He spent years separating me, keeping me weak. But you've made me whole again. She was right in front of me now. Close enough that I could see there was something wrong with her eyes. They reflected light in a way human eyes shouldn't, like they were made of glass. What happens now? I whispered. She smiled for the first time. It was worse than her blank expression. Now I can finally leave this place. I can move through photographs again, truly move, not just appear. And everywhere people look at old pictures, everywhere someone examines a family photo, I can be there, watching, waiting. You've given me the whole world, Amber. She reached out and touched the photograph I was holding, the first one with her parents. The moment her finger made contact with the image, she vanished. I stood alone in the empty store, holding a collection of 48 photographs, my heart racing. At first, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the stress and isolation had made me hallucinate. But then I looked at the photographs again. She was gone from all of them. Every single image now showed just the original subjects. Families, couples, children, with no girl in the background. The photos looked normal, complete, ordinary. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt a growing sense of dread. Because that night when I got home to my apartment, I looked at the photos on my phone. Vacation pictures, family gatherings, selfies with friends. And in the background of 17 of them, barely visible but undeniably present, was Rose. Same white dress. Same dark hair. Same knowing expression. She was in my photos now, my images, moving through my life through the lens of cameras and screens. I deleted the photos, all of them. I threw away my phone and bought a new one. But it didn't matter. Within a week, she was back. In photos taken by other people, photos I was tagged in, security camera footage when I walked into stores. And it's not just my photos. I've started seeing her in other people's images, viral photos online, news broadcasts, even professionally shot advertisements, always in the background, always watching with those glass eyes. I should have burned the photographs like Constance told me to. I should have left them scattered and hidden throughout the store. But I was too curious, too obsessed with solving the mystery. And now, Rose is free. Free to move through every photograph, every screen, every captured image in the world. Free to watch everyone, everywhere, through the very devices we've filled our lives with. The store is finished now. It's a beautiful cafe, just like I imagined. But I can't enjoy it. I can't enjoy anything anymore, because every time I see a camera, every time someone takes a picture near me, I wonder if she'll be in it. I wonder if she's watching through that lens, waiting. Sometimes I catch glimpses of her in the corner of my eye, standing in places no one else can see. Sometimes I wake up at night feeling watched, and I know she's there even if I can't see her. Edgar spent 30 years trying to contain her. And I undid all of it in 3 months because I couldn't leave a mystery unsolved. I don't take photos anymore. I've removed every mirror from my apartment. I avoid reflective surfaces, but it doesn't matter. She's in the world now, spreading through every captured moment, every preserved memory. And sometimes when I'm alone in the cafe late at night, cleaning up after closing, I see her reflection in the window glass. She's always smiling now, always watching. She found me, and through me, she found everyone else. I completed the collection. And now, we all pay the price. Story 6. Don't go out after dark. The innkeeper's hand was shaking when she handed me the key. The rule isn't negotiable, she said. And after sunset, you stay inside, lock your door, don't open it for any reason, don't look out the windows. And whatever you hear, whatever knocks on your door, don't answer. I thought she was being dramatic until that first night when I heard something testing every door handle on my floor, one by one, getting closer. And then my handle started to turn. I found the inn online while looking for a place to stay in Vermont. I'd been driving through New England, taking my time, visiting small towns and scenic overlooks. The inn at Millbridge looked perfect, a converted Victorian mansion, reasonable rates, and the photos showed a charming main street with local shops and restaurants. What the listing didn't mention was the rule. I arrived around 4 in the afternoon on a cloudy October day. The inn was exactly as advertised, a beautiful 3-story building with gingerbread trim and a wraparound porch. A woman in her 60s was sweeping the front steps when I pulled up. "You must be Nicole," she said. "I'm Helen. Come on in. I'll get you checked in before it gets dark." "Before it gets dark?" I asked. "Is something happening tonight?" She paused mid-sweep. "Every night. Come on, let's get you settled." The interior was cozy and well-maintained. Antique furniture, hardwood floors, framed landscapes on the walls. Helen led me to a small office off the main hallway and pulled out a registration book. Actual paper, not a computer. "I'll need a credit card for incidentals," she said, "and I need you to sign this." She handed me a form. It looked like a standard liability waiver until I reached the 3rd paragraph. Guest acknowledges and agrees to abide by the following safety regulation. Guest must remain inside the inn after sunset and before sunrise. Guest must not open exterior doors during these hours. Guest must not respond to any knocks, voices, or requests for entry during these hours. Guest acknowledges that failure to comply with these regulations may result in serious harm for which the inn cannot be held responsible. I looked up at Helen. "Is this a joke?" "I wish it was, but no. Those are the rules. Everyone in Millbridge follows them. If you're staying here, you need to follow them too." "Why?" "What's outside after dark?" She folded her hands on the desk. "Something we've learned to live with. Something that's been here longer than the town. We don't understand it, and we don't try to. We just follow the rules and we stay safe. You can do the same, or you can find somewhere else to stay." "What happens if I break the rules?" "I don't know. No one's been foolish enough to try in the 30 years I've been running this inn, and I'd like to keep it that way. I should have left. The rational part of my brain was screaming that this was insane, that normal towns don't have rules like this. But it was getting late, I was tired from driving, and part of me was morbidly curious. "Okay," I said. "I'll follow the rules." Helen looked relieved. "Good. There's dinner at the cafe up the street until 5:30. After that, you'll need to be inside. I keep snacks and drinks in the common room if you get hungry later. Your room is on the second floor, number 7. I brought my bag up to the room. It was small but comfortable. A double bed, a dresser, a chair by the window. The window itself had heavy curtains and what looked like blackout shades underneath them. I pulled one curtain aside and looked out at the street below. The town was eerily quiet for 4:30 in the afternoon. A few people were walking quickly toward their houses, carrying groceries or packages. A man was closing the shutters on a shop across the street. Everyone moved with purpose and urgency. By 5 o'clock, the street was empty. I went downstairs to find Helen locking the front door. She had 3 separate deadbolts plus a chain. "You're serious about this?" I said. "You will be too after tonight. Just remember, stay in your room, don't open the door, don't look outside. If you hear anything, ignore it." "What will I hear?" "That depends. It's different for everyone, but whatever it is, it's not real. It's just trying to get a reaction. Don't give it one." She headed toward her own quarters at the back of the inn, leaving me standing in the now locked building. I went to the common room, found some crackers and cheese, and made myself a snack. There were 2 other guests reading by the fireplace, a retired couple who introduced themselves as the Morgans. "First night?" Mrs. Morgan asked. "Is it that obvious?" "You look nervous, don't be. As long as you follow the rules, you'll be fine. We've been coming here for years." "Why?" I asked. "If there's something dangerous about this place, why come back?" Mr. Morgan smiled. "Because during the day, Millbridge is wonderful. Beautiful hiking, excellent restaurants, friendly people. And honestly, the night thing makes it more affordable. Not many tourists want to stay somewhere with a curfew." "But what is it? What's out there?" They exchanged a glance. "We don't know," Mrs. Morgan said. "And we don't want to know. We've learned not to be curious about certain things." I went back to my room around 6:30. The sun had set, and the sky outside my window was deep purple fading to black. The street lights came on, but they were dim. Much dimmer than normal street lights should be. I locked my door, closed the curtains, and sat on the bed with my phone. No signal. I tried the room's landline. It worked, but who would I call? The police? "Hi, I'm locked in an inn because something scary is outside." They'd think I was insane. Around 7 o'clock, I heard the first sound. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps walking down the street below, slow and deliberate. They sounded wrong somehow, too heavy with an uneven rhythm like something was dragging one foot. I sat very still, listening. The footsteps continued down the street, paused, then came back. They stopped directly below my window. "Don't look outside," Helen had said, but every instinct in me wanted to peek through the curtains, just a quick glance to see what was making that sound. I resisted, barely. The footsteps moved on. After a few minutes of silence, I started to relax. Maybe that was it. Maybe the danger was overblown local legend. Then I heard the front door of the inn rattle. Something was trying the handle, pulling on it, testing the locks. The rattling continued for several minutes. Then it stopped, and I heard something else. Footsteps inside the building, in the hallway downstairs. But that was impossible. The door was locked. I'd watched Helen lock it with 3 deadbolts. Nothing could have gotten in. The footsteps moved through the first floor, slow and searching. Then they started up the stairs to the second floor. My floor. I moved to the door and made sure it was locked. Then I backed away, sitting on the bed with my knees pulled to my chest. The footsteps reached the second floor hallway. They stopped at the first room, number 1 at the far end of the hall from me. I heard the door handle turn and rattle, then move on to room 2. Same thing. The handle turned, rattled, then moved on. Room 3, room 4, room 5. It was checking every room, testing every door, working its way down the hall toward me. Room 6, right next to mine. I held my breath. The walls of the inn were thin. I could hear it clearly now. Not just footsteps, but breathing. Heavy, wet breathing that sounded congested and wrong. Then my door handle started to turn. I watched it rotate slowly, testing the lock. The deadbolt held. The handle turned back the other way, testing again. Then there was a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. "Hello?" a voice said. A woman's voice, soft and frightened. "Please, I need help. Can you let me in?" I didn't answer. Helen's rules were explicit. Don't respond to knocks or voices. "Please," the voice continued, "there's something chasing me. I need somewhere to hide. Please open the door." The voice sounded genuine, terrified, human. But Helen had said it wasn't real. "I can hear you breathing in there," the voice said, taking on a slightly sharper edge. "I know you're there. Why won't you help me?" I pressed my hands over my mouth to muffle my breathing. "Fine," the voice said, and now it was different, deeper, angry. "Stay in there. See if your door holds all night." The presence moved away from my door, footsteps receding down the hall. I heard it test room 8, then the bathroom, then start down the stairs. I stayed frozen on the bed, too afraid to move. An hour passed, maybe more. The old building creaked and settled. I heard sounds from outside, voices calling, things scratching at windows, footsteps circling the building. Around midnight, there was a scream. A woman's scream, cut short. It came from somewhere outside, maybe a block away. I nearly jumped off the bed to look out the window, but I stopped myself. Helen's rules. Don't look outside. The scream came again, closer this time, right below my window. Then silence. At some point, I must have fallen asleep from exhaustion because I woke to sunlight streaming through gaps in the curtains. I checked my phone, 7:30 a.m. I unlocked my door and stepped into the hallway. Everything looked normal, clean, quiet, ordinary. The Morgans were already downstairs having breakfast. Helen was in the kitchen making coffee. "How was your night?" she asked pleasantly. "Terrifying. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Something tried to get into my room and I heard a scream." Helen nodded. "That sounds about typical, but you're safe. You followed the rules." "What was it? What was in the hallway?" "I don't know, Nicole. And I don't want to know. All that matters is that during the day we're safe. During the night we stay inside and we don't engage with whatever's out there. That's how we survive." I wanted to argue, to demand real answers, but I could tell I wouldn't get any. The entire town had decided that ignorance and compliance were preferable to understanding. I spent that day exploring Millbridge. It was indeed beautiful. A picturesque New England town with excellent hiking trails, charming shops, and friendly people. But as the afternoon wore on, I watched the transformation happen again. By 4:30, people were hurrying home. By 5, the streets were empty. By 5:30, every door was locked and every shutter was closed. I checked out after the second night. I'd followed the rules both nights, stayed in my room, ignored the sounds. But I couldn't handle a third night. Helen didn't try to convince me to stay. "Travel safe," she said. "And if you ever tell anyone about Millbridge, they won't believe you anyway. They never do." She was right. When I tried to tell friends about the town with the curfew, about the thing that walked the streets at night, they laughed or looked at me with concern. "Sounds like you had a weird dream," one friend said. But I know what I heard. I know what tried to get into my room. And sometimes late at night in my apartment in Boston, I hear slow footsteps in the hallway outside my door. I hear my handle turn slightly, testing the lock. I hear a soft knock, followed by a familiar voice asking to be let in. I never answer. I stay quiet and still until the presence moves on. Because whatever was in Millbridge that night, I think it followed me home. It's not bound by geography, it's bound by knowledge, by awareness. And once you know it exists, once you've heard it outside your door, it knows you exist too. I've started checking all my locks twice before bed. I've installed additional deadbolts. I keep my curtains closed at night, and I never ever look outside after dark. Because following the rules is the only thing that keeps you safe, and I think I'll be following them for the rest of my life. Story 7. The Last Family in Wicker Hollow. The real estate agent had one last thing to show us before we signed the papers. She pulled out a folder containing photocopies of newspaper articles and police reports. 4 families before yours, she said quietly. All left within 6 weeks. 2 filed missing person reports for family members before they left. 1 family just disappeared. I need you to know what you're getting into. My husband laughed it off. I should have listened to her instead. We thought we'd found paradise. Tyler and I had been searching for months for a house where we could raise our daughter Chloe, somewhere quiet and safe, away from the chaos of Chicago. When the listing for 47 Orchard Lane appeared, we couldn't believe the price. A 4-bedroom Victorian with original details, an acre of land and a view of the mountains for less than half what we'd budgeted. There has to be something wrong with it, Tyler said, scrolling through the photos, but there wasn't. The inspection came back clean. The house was structurally sound, recently updated, even had new appliances. The only unusual thing was the price and the fact that it had been on the market for less than a week. Wicker Hollow itself was tiny, maybe 500 people, but charming in a rural Vermont way. 1 main street, a general store, a church, a volunteer fire department. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where kids could play outside until dark, where you left your doors unlocked. The real estate agent, Martha, was pleasant but seemed oddly eager to close the sale quickly. She kept emphasizing how perfect the house was for a young family, how lucky we were to find it, how we should really move fast before someone else made an offer. We signed the papers on a Friday in July. Martha watched us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not happiness, exactly. Something more complicated. Before we left her office, she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "I need to show you something," she said. "Legally, I'm required to disclose it." She spread out photocopies of newspaper articles and police reports, all from the past 8 years. All about 47 Orchard Lane. The first article was from 2016. Family reports missing son in Wicker Hollow. A 15-year-old boy had disappeared from the house one night. His bedroom window was found open. No sign of forced entry or struggle. No trace of him was ever found. The second was from 2018. Another mysterious departure from Orchard Lane property. This time, an entire family, the Hendersons, had left in the middle of the night, abandoning their possessions, leaving food on the table. They were found 2 days later in a motel in New Hampshire, refusing to return, refusing to explain why they'd fled. The pattern continued. 2019, family leaves after 3 weeks, citing irreconcilable differences with the property. 2021, couple files restraining order against unknown person or persons, then moves out suddenly. 2022, family disappears completely. Car still in the driveway, all possessions left behind, never seen again. "Why are you showing us this now?" Tyler demanded. "After we've signed?" "Because you need to know what you're dealing with, and because..." Martha hesitated. "Because I'm hoping you'll be different. That you'll figure out what the others didn't." "Figure what out?" "Why they left. or why they couldn't. Tyler wanted to back out immediately, but we'd already put down earnest money, signed the contract, given notice on our Chicago apartment. And honestly, I didn't believe in curses or haunted houses. There were logical explanations for everything. The missing boy probably ran away. The families probably had financial problems or personal crises they didn't want to publicize. We moved in on a Saturday in August. Our neighbors were distant, polite but unwilling to engage beyond basic pleasantries. When I tried to introduce myself to the woman next door, she looked at our house and said, "You're in the Orchard Lane house, God help you?" Then she went inside and closed the door. The first week was normal. We unpacked, set up Chloe's room, started making the house our own. Chloe, who was 6, loved having a big yard to play in. Tyler was already planning a vegetable garden. I was setting up a home office where I could work remotely. It was on day 10 that we noticed the first strange thing. Chloe had made a friend. She talked about him constantly, a boy named Peter who played with her in the backyard, who knew all the best hiding spots, who was teaching her games she'd never heard of. "That's wonderful," I said. "Where does Peter live?" "Here," Chloe said, "in the walls." I laughed. "You mean next door?" "No, Mommy. In our walls. He comes out at night to play." Kids have active imaginations. I didn't think much of it, but then I started hearing sounds in the walls myself. Scratching like something moving between the studs. Soft thuds like footsteps on the other side of the plaster. Tyler called an exterminator. "Probably squirrels or raccoons," he said. The exterminator found nothing. No signs of animals, no droppings, no entry points. "Your walls are clean," he said. "Whatever you're hearing, it's not wildlife." The sounds continued. Every night, like something was pacing inside the house's skeleton, moving from room to room. Chloe said it was just Peter playing. She wasn't afraid. That almost made it worse. On day 18, I found the door to the basement open. I'd specifically closed and locked it that morning because the basement stairs were steep and I didn't want Chloe going down there alone. But now it was wide open, the lock undone from the inside. "Did you open the basement?" I asked Tyler. "No, did you?" We went down together. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, stone walls, exposed joists. In the far corner, we found something that made my skin crawl: children's toys. Old toys, decades old by the look of them. A rusted tricycle, a porcelain doll with a cracked face, wooden blocks, a jack-in-the-box. "Those weren't here during the inspection," Tyler said. "Then where did they come from?" That night, I researched the house's history. The records were frustratingly incomplete, but I found a news article from 1952. Tragedy at Wicker Hollow residence. Boy lost in blizzard. A 7-year-old named Peter Holloway had apparently wandered away from 47 Orchard Lane during a severe winter storm and was never found. His body was never recovered. Peter. Chloe's imaginary friend was named Peter. I didn't want to believe in ghosts, but the evidence was becoming hard to ignore. I brought it up to Tyler that night. "Let's say it's true," he said. "Let's say there's a ghost of a little boy here. He hasn't hurt anyone. Maybe he's just lonely. Maybe Chloe being here is actually good for him. Or maybe that's why the other families left. Maybe it starts innocently and becomes something worse." We decided to wait and see. We'd give it another week. If things escalated, we'd reconsider. Things escalated. On day 24, I woke up at 3 in the morning because Chloe was screaming. I ran to her room and found her sitting up in bed, pointing at the window. "Peter's friends are here," she sobbed. "All of Peter's friends." There were faces at the window, small faces, pale, pressed against the glass from outside. Except we were on the 2nd floor. There was nothing for them to be standing on. Tyler ran outside with a flashlight. No one was there. No ladder, no footprints in the soft earth below Chloe's window. Nothing. The next morning, we found words written on the inside of Chloe's closet door in what looked like charcoal. Stay, play, stay, play. We're leaving, I said. Today, right now. We started packing. But then we discovered we had a problem. We couldn't remember how to get out of Wicker Hollow. Tyler drove to what should have been the main road leading to the highway. But the road forked unexpectedly, neither direction looking familiar. We tried one way, drove for 30 minutes, and ended up back at our house. We tried the other direction. Same result. Every road looped back to Orchard Lane. This is impossible, Tyler said. The roads can't just loop. We tried again the next day with GPS. The GPS would show us heading away from town, but visually we'd see landmarks that indicated we were circling back. It was like the town itself was a maze with no exit. On day 30, we went to the police station. Chief Morrison listened to our story without expression. "You're not the first family to try to leave," he said. "Then help us. Tell us how." "I can't, because I don't know. None of us do." "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair. "Wicker Hollow is different. It's always been different. People can come in easily enough, but leaving, that's harder, especially from certain houses, especially from 47 Orchard Lane." "Why?" "There are theories. Some people think Peter Holloway never really died in that blizzard. They think he's still here in some form and he keeps children here to play with. Others think the house itself is alive somehow, that it feeds on families. I don't know what to believe. I just know that most families who move into that house either leave within weeks or..." He trailed off. "Or what?" "Or they become part of the town. They stop trying to leave. They accept it. That's insane." "Is it? Look at the families who did get out. They left everything behind. They fled in the night, traumatized, refusing to talk about what happened. The ones who stayed seem fine after a while. They adapt. They settle in. Maybe that's not the worst fate." We refused to accept it. We tried every road, every path, every possible route out of Wicker Hollow. All of them looped back. It was like the town existed in a pocket dimension, accessible from the outside but with no exit from within. On day 39, Tyler disappeared. I woke up and he wasn't in bed. His car was in the driveway. His phone was on the nightstand. But he was gone. I searched the house, the yard, the whole neighborhood. No one had seen him. Chief Morrison filed a report but didn't seem optimistic. "He probably tried to leave on foot," he said. "Through the woods. That's what others have tried. They don't come back." I was alone with Chloe in that house, and I was terrified. The sounds in the walls were constant now. Chloe talked to Peter and his friends openly like they were real playmates. I'd see shadows moving in my peripheral vision. I'd find objects moved, doors opened, messages written. And then, on day 42, Tyler came back. He walked up the driveway in the middle of the day, looking tired but unhurt. I ran to him sobbing, demanding to know where he'd been. "I tried to walk out through the forest," he said. "I walked for hours following the sun, making sure I was going in a straight line, but no matter how far I walked, I'd end up back at our yard, so I just gave up. I sat down and accepted it. And once I accepted it, the walk home only took 10 minutes. Something was different about Tyler after that. He wasn't frightened anymore. He seemed almost content. "It's not so bad here," he said. "Good schools, low crime, friendly people. Maybe we should just embrace it. Embrace being trapped. We're not trapped. We're protected. There's a difference." But I knew better. I'd seen what this place did to people. It broke them down until they stopped resisting, until they accepted their prison and called it home. I decided I would get out, with or without Tyler. I would take Chloe and find a way, even if I had to walk until I collapsed. But the next morning, Chloe was gone. I tore the house apart looking for her. She wasn't in her room, wasn't in the yard, wasn't anywhere. Tyler seemed unconcerned. "She's with Peter," he said calmly. "She's playing." "Where?" "In the walls." He said it like it was normal, like our daughter disappearing into the literal walls of the house was just an ordinary play date. I heard her then, her voice muffled and distant, calling for me. It was coming from inside the walls. I grabbed a hammer and started smashing the plaster in the hallway, tearing it away in chunks. Tyler tried to stop me, but I shoved him back. I had to find her. I had to get her out. Behind the plaster was a space that shouldn't exist. Not just the hollow between studs, but an actual passage, wide enough for a child to walk through, and leading deeper into the house's skeleton. I grabbed a flashlight and crawled in. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes narrowing to almost nothing, sometimes opening into larger voids. I could hear Chloe ahead of me, laughing now, playing. I followed the sound for what felt like hours, crawling through the guts of the house, and I found them. Children. Dozens of children living in the empty spaces between the walls, in rooms that existed in impossible geometries, in a version of the house that was larger on the inside than out. Chloe was there, playing with Peter, a pale boy in old-fashioned clothes, and all his friends. Other children from other eras, other families, all kept here, all protected, all trapped. "Mommy," Chloe ran to me, "look how many friends I have now." I grabbed her hand. "We're leaving, right now." But Peter stepped forward. "She doesn't want to leave. None of them do. It's safe here. Nothing bad can happen here. Outside is dangerous. Outside has storms and strangers and things that hurt children. Here, we play forever. She's my daughter. She's our friend, and friends stay together." I pulled Chloe toward the passage I'd entered through, but it was gone. The wall was solid behind me. Peter smiled sadly. "You can go if you want," he said. "Parents always can eventually, but children need protection. And that's what this house does. It keeps them safe, forever." I don't know how I got out. I don't remember crawling back through the walls. I just know that I woke up on my bedroom floor alone with Tyler shaking me. "Where's Chloe?" I screamed. "In her room, asleep. She's fine. You've been sleepwalking. You've been having nightmares." But when I ran to her room, it wasn't my Chloe in that bed. It looked like her, sounded like her, but something essential was gone. She was hollowed out. A shell going through the motions of being a child. The real Chloe was still in the walls, playing with Peter and his eternal friends. That was 2 years ago. We still live in Wicker Hollow. We still live at 47 Orchard Lane. I've stopped trying to leave. Tyler says I've adapted, that I've finally accepted our new life, but I haven't. I just don't have a choice. The thing that looks like Chloe goes to school, eats dinner, watches TV. And at night I hear my real daughter in the walls laughing and playing and calling for me. Sometimes I press my ear to the plaster and whisper to her through the barrier. She's happy, I think. Safe, protected from every danger the outside world could offer. Except the danger of never growing up, never leaving. Never becoming anything except a permanent playmate for a boy who died 70 years ago and refused to move on. Martha was right. I should have listened. We shouldn't have been so eager for paradise at a discount. Because the price wasn't the money we paid. The price was everything we'd lose after we moved in. And we're still paying it. Every single day. Story 8. The census that never ended. She showed up again yesterday. Same clipboard, same pleasant smile, same questions that started normal and became increasingly invasive. "What recurring nightmare did you have as a child?" she asked, pen hovering over her form. The one you've never told anyone about? I don't know how she knew I'd had one. I don't know how she always knows exactly what to ask. But when I didn't answer, she just smiled and made a note. It's okay, she said. I already know. I just needed to see if you'd tell the truth. I moved to Redfield in early spring right after my 30th birthday. New job, new apartment, new start. The apartment was perfect. Second floor of a converted house, hardwood floors, lots of light. I'd been there 3 days when she knocked on my door. It was a Wednesday afternoon, maybe 2 o'clock. I'd been unpacking boxes when I heard the knock. I opened the door to find a woman in her 40s, professional looking, holding a clipboard and wearing an official looking badge on a lanyard. Hi there, she said warmly. I'm conducting a census for the county. Do you have a few minutes to answer some questions? It seemed legit. Census workers do door-to-door surveys. I'd participated in them before. Sure, I said. She smiled. Great. Can I come in, or would you prefer to do this in the doorway? Doorway's fine. Of course, she consulted her clipboard. Let's start with the basics. Your name? Jordan Ellis. Age? 30. Occupation? I'm a software engineer. I just started at Redfield Tech. She wrote quickly, her pen making efficient scratching sounds. And you moved here from Portland, Oregon. Family status? Married, single, divorced? Single. Do you have any siblings? One, a younger sister. She lives in Seattle. And your parents? My mom is in Portland. My dad passed away 5 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss. She made another note. Last question for today. How would you describe your general health? Excellent, good, fair, poor? Good, I guess. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. She tucked her pen behind her ear and gave me another warm smile. Someone will probably follow up in a few weeks with some additional questions. County policy, just routine verification. She left and I went back to unpacking. The whole interaction had taken maybe 5 minutes. I didn't think about it again until she showed up the next week. Same time, same clipboard. I opened the door and she smiled like we were old friends. Hi, Jordan. Just a few follow-up questions if you don't mind. Oh, okay. She consulted her clipboard. Last time you mentioned your sister lives in Seattle. What's her name? Megan. Megan Ellis. And what does Megan do for work? She's a teacher, 3rd grade. How often do you two talk? That question felt slightly odd, but I answered anyway. Maybe twice a month? We text more than we call. And would you describe your relationship as close? Yeah, I'd say so. We're pretty close. When was the last time you saw her in person? Christmas, she came to Portland. More writing. And your mother, what's her name? Carol Ellis. What kind of relationship do you have with your mother? That crossed a line from census questions into something more personal, but she asked it so matter-of-factly that I answered without thinking. It's good, we're close. She calls me every Sunday. Does she know about your last relationship, the one that ended badly? I froze. What? Your last relationship. Does your mother know the details? That's not a census question. She looked up from her clipboard, still pleasant. I apologize if it seemed intrusive. County policy includes mental health and relationship status assessments now. It helps with social services planning. I don't think I want to answer any more questions. That's completely your right. Thank you for your time, Jordan. She left. I closed the door, feeling unsettled. The last relationship question had been too specific, too knowing. My previous relationship had ended 6 months ago badly, and I hadn't told my mother the real reason. How could a census worker know that? I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just a lucky guess. Maybe that was a standard question designed to make people uncomfortable enough to reveal things. But she came back the next week, and the week after that. Each time the questions became more personal, more specific, more impossible for her to know the answers to. What were you thinking about at 2:47 a.m. last Tuesday when you couldn't sleep? Why do you still have your father's watch even though you never wear it? What did you steal from the drugstore when you were 13? What's the real reason you left your last job? I started not answering the door, but she'd wait. She'd knock periodically every few minutes for up to an hour. My downstairs neighbors never seemed to notice or care, and if I left for work or groceries, she'd be waiting when I got back. I called the county office. I keep getting visited by a census worker, I told them. Is this normal? She comes every week. What's the worker's name? I don't know. She has a badge, but I never looked at the name. Can you describe her? I did. Average height, brown hair pulled back, maybe mid-40s, professional clothes. There was a pause. Sir, we don't have any census operations happening in Redfield right now. The last county census was completed 2 years ago. The next one isn't until 2025. Then who is she? I have no idea, but she's not with our office. If she comes back, I'd suggest not opening the door, and maybe file a police report. I did file a report. Officer Chen came to my apartment, took my statement, asked for a description. We'll increase patrols in this area, he said. If she comes back, call us immediately. Don't engage with her. She came back 2 days later. This time I didn't open the door. I just called through it. I know you're not really a census worker. I called the county. Leave me alone or I'm calling the police. There was silence. Then her voice, still pleasant. I'm not trying to frighten you, Jordan. I'm just gathering information. For what? Who are you working for? I'm working for the same people I've always worked for. The people who need to know things. That doesn't answer my question. I know, but it's the only answer I can give you. A pause. I'll come back when you're ready to talk. You have some questions I still need answers to. I'm not answering any more questions. We'll see. Her footsteps retreated down the stairs. I watched through the window as she walked down the street, clipboard tucked under her arm, and got into a nondescript sedan. I tried to find out more about her. I asked my neighbors if they'd seen her. Most said no. One elderly woman, Mrs. Kowalski from across the street, gave me a strange look when I described the woman. Oh, she said quietly. She's been making rounds. She visits everyone eventually. Everyone in the building? Everyone in Redfield. Sooner or later, she's been coming to me for 3 years. 3 years? The same woman asking you questions for 3 years? Mrs. Kowalski nodded. Every week or two, sometimes more often. The questions get very personal. Sometimes she asks things I've never told anyone. Things I didn't even know I remembered. Have you called the police? They can't help. She's not breaking any laws. She knocks on your door. You can choose to answer or not. If you let her in, that's your choice. If you answer her questions, that's your choice. She's never threatened anyone, never forced entry, so what can the police do? But who is she? What does she want? I don't know. I have theories, but they sound crazy. Maybe she's gathering information for some massive database. Maybe she's doing psychological research. Maybe she's just watching, recording, documenting our lives in detail so complete it's almost invasive. Why? Mrs. Kowalski shrugged. Maybe for the same reason anyone documents anything. To remember, to study, to control. I stopped trying to understand years ago. Now I just answer her questions because it's easier than resisting. Easier how? You'll see. I didn't understand what she meant until the questions started appearing in other ways. I'd open my laptop and find a document I didn't create containing questions. What are you most afraid of losing? Who do you think about when you're alone? What's the worst thing you've ever done? I'd find notes slipped under my door with similar questions. I'd receive emails from addresses that didn't exist, asking for clarifications on previous answers. It was like she'd opened a channel into my life, and now the questions flowed through every available medium. I tried changing my locks. Didn't matter, the notes still appeared. I tried changing my email password. The emails still came. I tried staying with a friend for a week. On the third day, my friend asked me, "Who's the woman who keeps calling about you?" She says she's doing a survey and needs to ask me some questions about you. I told her I'm not comfortable with that. She'd found me even there. When I came back to my apartment, she was sitting on the stairs outside my door, clipboard in lap, waiting patiently. "I'm not answering any more questions," I said. "That's fine. But you should know the questions don't stop just because you stop answering. They accumulate, they pile up. Eventually, there will be so many unanswered questions about you that something has to give." What does that mean? It means that one way or another the information gets recorded. You can provide it voluntarily or it can be extracted through observation, but the documentation will be complete. You're insane. Maybe, or maybe I'm just doing my job. Maybe someone somewhere needs to know everything about everyone, every detail, every secret, every fear and hope and memory. Maybe that's what holds the world together, complete information. Maybe I'm preventing chaos by ensuring nothing is forgotten, nothing is hidden, nothing remains unknown. She stood up and walked past me down the stairs. "I'll be back next week, same time. You can answer my questions then, or we can continue this way. Either option is acceptable." She's kept her word. She comes every week. Sometimes I answer the door, sometimes I don't. When I do, I answer some questions, but not others. The ones I don't answer show up later in notes or emails or documents on my computer. My coworkers have started mentioning that someone's been asking about me. My friends receive calls. My sister got a letter asking her to describe my childhood in detail. It's like I'm being documented, cataloged, archived in some vast system I can't see or understand. And the worst part? I'm starting to just answer her questions because Mrs. Kowalski was right. It's easier than resisting. Fighting it takes so much energy and the questions come anyway, so why not just give in? Why not let myself be fully known by whoever or whatever is doing this? Yesterday she asked about my recurring childhood nightmare. The one where I was lost in a house with infinite rooms, searching for an exit that didn't exist. I'd never told anyone about that dream. When I didn't answer, she smiled and wrote something on her clipboard. "It's okay," she said. "I already know. I just needed to see if you'd tell the truth." That's when I realized she's not gathering information. She's verifying what she already knows. She's checking our answers against some master list, some complete record of every detail of our lives that somehow already exists. Which means someone somewhere already knows everything about me, about all of us, and she's just confirming the data. I don't know what happens when the verification is complete. I don't know what comes next, but she'll be back next week. Same time, same clipboard, same knowing smile. And I'll probably answer the door, because what else can I do? At least when I answer, I get to pretend I'm participating voluntarily, that I have some control. But deep down, I know the truth. I stopped having control the moment I opened the door that first time. Now I'm just another entry in whatever database she's compiling. Another life fully documented, fully known, fully recorded in detail, so complete it strips away any privacy, any mystery, any part of myself I thought was mine alone. She'll finish with me eventually. And then she'll move on to the next person, the next apartment, the next life to catalog. And somewhere in some facility or system I'll never see, Everything about me will exist in perfect permanent record. Every secret, every fear, every moment I thought was private, all of it known, all of it documented, all of it filed away forever.